Driving Force Radio, where we seek to discover each and every week what drives today's leaders. On our show today is It's Energy 101, and my co-host is Kelly De La Torre, the founder and CEO of Rapid Tech Transit, a Denver-based consulting firm, as well as one of the founders of Women in Energy. Welcome to the show, Kelly.
Thanks for having me, Jan.
You know, Kelly, this is an exciting show. Every time we get together, we have so many really exciting people to talk to, and today is no different.
Yeah, today we're going to be talking about a report that was just released earlier this week.
Yep, and it's from the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project, and our guest is Dr. Howard Geller, who's the former executive director of the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy. That's hard to say. And he's now the executive director of SWEEP, a public interest venture he founded in 2001. And the report is really bringing light to a whole lot of really astounding energy issues.
Well, and we've talked about this on the show before, that energy efficiency, it's the cleanest, most reliable, cheapest energy. Mm-hmm. I mean, energy efficiency is the energy that you don't use. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, and how consumers can reap the benefits of implementing energy efficiency measures, and how the utilities, what I find really exciting about this report is how Dr. Geller went through and figured out the best practices from around the country, and says in this report, or actually he'll explain better, what are the best practices? What do we need to do to get this going? And the savings are enormous. The savings are enormous, but it's not only money that brings the savings. And I know that the report is titled the $20 Billion Bonanza, Best Practices, Electric Utility Energy Efficiency Programs and Their Benefits for the Southwest. And I know that you have an example of this, Kelly. Yeah, so in the report, that 50 billion kilowatt hours of energy could be saved per year by 2020. That's equivalent to the annual electricity use of 4.6 million typical households. And that's just by energy efficiency methodologies. Yeah, and it's not only money savings, but it's health. Obviously, if you're not using the energy, you have less need to build these generation facilities, so you're going to have less emissions. That leads to less asthma. That leads to, less other health conditions that we'll talk about today. Absolutely. Well, I want to welcome you to the show, Dr. Geller. How are you today?
I'm fine. Thanks for having me.
Dr. Geller, before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about the SWEEP organization that's based in Boulder?
Sure. SWEEP is the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project, and we work on advancing energy efficiency in 6 states in the region: Colorado, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, and Wyoming.
And when you say energy efficiency project, and that you're out there as a public interest venture, what does that mean? What are you trying to accomplish?
Well, we work on policy reform, we work on state legislation, trying to get the policy framework right so that consumers are better educated, businesses are better educated, there's financing options, there's incentives, rebates from utilities to take advantage of the most cost-effective and cleanest resource that we have, which is improving energy efficiency.
Well, and we talk a lot about this show where we use the terms kilowatt hour, we use the term, demand response. Can you give a little bit to the listener, just give an overview about what these words mean and how they're, power and energy are often interchanged, and so could you just give a brief Energy 101 on that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So power is the ability to produce or use energy. So the unit of power are watts. So a 60-watt light bulb is rated based on its power. But when the light bulb is turned on, it uses energy. So if the light bulb is on for 1 hour, you're consuming 60 watt-hours of electricity.
Okay, that's
and
a
if
great
it was on
description.
for about 15 hours, it'd be about 1 kilowatt hour, which is 1,000 watt-hours, which we all pay about 10 cents for. So we pay for energy consumption, but the ability to use or produce energy are watts or kilowatts or megawatts. Power plants are rated in terms of megawatts, which are millions of watts.
And what about the demand charges? So we hear about we should turn our washing machine on in the middle of the night as opposed to during the day, or not run multiple appliances at the same time. Can you explain a little bit about that from the utility perspective?
Sure. That recommendation is provided so that we're not increasing the peak demand on the utility grid, which occurs typically in the late afternoon on hot summer days when every household and every business has their air conditioner on. We want to make better use of the utility system and increase the demand during those off-peak hours at night as much as possible to level out the load and not increase the peak demand. Utilities are adding new power plants because of the growth in peak demand. As much as we can do to hold that down will help us avoid those new power plants, which will reduce costs for all consumers.
Okay, that makes sense.
Well, and Dr. Geller, as you've spoken about this, and I've looked through some of the bullet points of the report that was just issued by SWEEP, and I have to ask, what prompted your organization, what prompted SWEEP to do this report on the $20 billion bonanza, and what were some key findings?
So we've been working to build up the utility energy efficiency programs, those education programs, rebate programs that the large electric utilities like Xcel Energy in Colorado and Arizona Public Service Company and Arizona Public Service Company, New Mexico. Those utilities have been expanding their energy efficiency programs over the last decade. When we got started in 2001, those utilities throughout the region only spent about $20 million a year on energy efficiency programs. This year, those...
Is that total?
Total
Wow.
for the 6 states,
Yeah.
which is not very much money.
Yeah.
That's about 0.1% of their revenues.
Yeah, that's crazy.
This year, all the electric utilities in our 6-state region will be spending about $300 million on energy efficiency programs. So they have built up their programs quite a bit. And we did this study to look at the costs and benefits of taking these programs to the next level, to making them best practice and state-of-the-art, to keep growing the programs, keep growing the services, keep growing the energy savings. What would it cost and what would be the benefits of doing so?
And what are some of these programs that are implemented right now for, say, residential use?
So utilities provide low-cost energy audits of homes and businesses. They make recommendations as to what you can do to make your business or household more efficient and do so cost effectively. They then provide assistance, often technical assistance and rebates if you move ahead with energy efficiency projects, if you add insulation in your attic and reduce your heating and cooling costs, if you replace an old furnace or air conditioner with a new, more efficient furnace or air conditioner. They provide discounts on energy efficient light bulbs in stores, on compact fluorescent lamps, and today LED lamps. They provide services of picking up old inefficient appliances like refrigerators and freezers and getting them out of the garage or basement and then recycling them to the maximum extent possible and giving you a check for $30 or $50 if you turn in that old refrigerator that might be the second or third refrigerator that isn't doing very much but consuming electricity.
Yeah, keeping very little. You know, that's. I went to a presentation by Greg Nelson at PNM once, and he said, you know, really take a look at, and do you really need to keep one case of Coke cool in your garage?
Right.
Do you need to do that? You know, there are some other simple things that we can do instead of just regulatory changes. We can all make an impact.
Right. Right. Implementing energy efficiency is good support in terms of the programs, the education, and the rebates, but it does require the household and or the business to take action. Nobody's forcing people to stop wasting energy, so it's a partnership between the utility and the consumer.
Well, and Howard, that's a question I want to ask. I mean, I hear efficiency all the time, and Kelly and I talk a lot about this energy conversation and this efficiency conversation. But it seems like, at the very base level, like turning off the water while you're brushing your teeth, or, shutting the refrigerator door while you pour your cup of milk and then put it back in, are easy, basic things. But when it comes to these larger energy things where you're asking people to do a little more, give up a little more, it seems like that's a really hard hill to move up because people don't want to give up, or it's almost a behavior change. How are you guys seeing that as a best practice shift or a change between the utilities and organizations like yours, as well as the consumer? Because I think that's one of those hiccups, if you will, in trying to get energy efficiency as a huge buy-in.
Yeah. Well, we're not asking people to give up. We're asking people to buy an efficient appliance, an Energy Star appliance, when they need a new refrigerator or air conditioner or television or other product that has the federal Energy Star label if it's an energy efficient product. We're asking people to make that investment in energy efficient windows or any proper insulation levels and do it once and reap the benefits over 10, 20, 30 years. Reduce your utility bill, keep down those costs so that you don't have to give up, that you're seeing a more reasonable utility bill, and at times when the budget's tight, you don't have to give up on heating or cooling. You can stay comfortable with reducing the energy waste. One of the programs in our set of best practice programs is an emerging program called Home Energy Reports, which is focused more on getting some behavior change and helping families reduce the energy waste. And there are periodic reports that come in the mail or over the internet that compares your total electricity use or natural gas use to typical neighbors and tells you how you're doing relative to sort of a similar demographic, whether you're better than average, or below average. And the reports also provide some tips that are tailored to your household. The folks that put these together collect data on the demographics. They know whether you have 3 kids or not, and they know the size of your house, and provide some recommendations of simple, no-cost or low-cost things that you can do to save energy just through better behavior. And on average, they get a reasonable response. Not everybody responds, but they typically generate 2 to 3% savings.
Wow.
Across all households. That means some households are saving 5 to 10%, sure, and some are doing nothing.
See, here's the issue with those, is I get one of those reports, and if you're a sort of a competitive person like myself, you get it and you're like, oh, and so then you're and then you're competitive with yourself the next month, and then it's like this, I feel like I'm competing against some kind of ghost out there, but I'm doing a good job.
She is doing a good job. She gave up her dryer for a clothesline.
Excellent.
Now my husband calls me Laura Ingalls Wilder, but I can deal with it. Yeah, so I'm doing much better, and it also has on my street created a bit of competition, which I think is good.
Good. Put those neighbors to shame.
Yeah, exactly. So then, so you looked at all of these best practices across the country. What's the methodology behind the report?
Right. So we worked with national experts to identify the best practice utility energy efficiency programs around the country. And then we assumed that we could apply them throughout our states over time. We took a look at where the utilities are at today. We started the analysis in 2010 and counted the savings from the actual programs in 2010 and 2011. And then in 2012, we started to phase in better programs based on these best practices. We looked at the participation rates in the programs, the savings per participant, the cost to get participation, and over time we ramped up the best practice programs across all the electric utilities, not just the large utilities, all the electric utilities in our 6 states. And looked at how much we could save by the year 2020 if we did that. We found that overall we could save about 21%
That's crazy.
across the entire region compared to not doing any energy efficiency. 21% savings from 10 years of effort in the year 2020. We then did some modeling of the utility systems, hired another set of experts to model what would be the requirements for new power plants, the consumption of fuel to operate power plants, the costs to invest in new power plants and pollution control technologies in a reference scenario without the efficiency programs, and then the high efficiency scenario where we got the 21% savings. And we looked at the difference in costs and the difference in emissions between the two, and that's the benefit side. Compared those benefits in terms of the fuel savings for utilities, the avoided investment for utilities, to the costs of implementing the programs and the costs that households and businesses would incur from implementing energy efficiency measures. It's not just the cost for the programs. The utility doesn't pay for it all.
Right.
They usually share the cost with the participants. And so we compared the total costs for getting that 21% savings to the benefits if we did achieve the 21% savings. And we calculated it in a net present value term, which is the way economists like to compare different costs over time. We found that the bottom line is that the total investment required to get that 21% savings across our 6 states is about $17 billion. About half would be made by utilities and half would be made by households and businesses, according to our analysis. But the benefits would be around $37 billion. So benefits exceeding costs by more than a factor of 2. And the difference is the $20 billion of net benefits.
Yeah. Right.
Therefore, the title, the $20 billion bonanza. That's the opportunity before us here from moving ahead and ramping up our efficiency programs to best practice levels.
So when we talk about the $20 billion bonanza, and we talk about that net benefit, if you will, how does that break down for some of the states? What are some of the states that see the most benefit from this? I think I'm reading here from the report that Colorado could potentially see $4.8 billion in benefits through greater commitment to energy efficiencies. How does that happen? I mean, I just, that's such a stunning number, and I think, billions and trillions are rolling off the tongues of politicians and people today. But at the end of the day, that's a lot of zeros. I think a lot of businesses, as well as consumers, don't understand the magnitude of $1 billion, if you will, in terms of dollars.
Right. Right. So, as you mentioned, the larger states would have greater benefits. Arizona's our largest state, and their net benefits are close to $10 billion, and Colorado is close to $5 billion, and the other 4 states make up the other $5 billion in net benefits. So if we break it down to what does the typical household get out of this if we did this, the typical household would see something like $1,000 to $1,500 in net benefits. Some households more, some households less. And businesses likewise, depending on the size of the business, might see $5,000 in net benefits, $10,000 or $20,000 in net benefits on average. And hopefully over time, virtually every household and business makes an investment in energy efficiency, takes advantage of the utility programs, the rebates and other support that utilities provide, and everybody contributes, everybody participates, everybody reduces their electricity use and lowers their utility bills.
I think that is a big challenge that I see out there, is that I don't know if commercial building owners recognize well, I know some of them do, but all of them recognize that you can call your utility and that there are these programs, because it's not saving energy is not their core business,
Right.
necessarily. So they've got this business to run. That's what they do, and they don't have the expertise to look at their energy. The energy use is like a necessary evil for them, and so. How are you approaching making sure that they know that they can reach out and get that expert help?
Right. Well, of course, the very large businesses, the Coors Brewery and
Yeah.
big mining companies, they have facility and energy managers that know about these programs and are working on finding and implementing energy efficiency projects all the time. But small businesses don't. And so one of the programs that some of our utilities are implementing, that we recommend all utilities implement, is a one-stop service program for small businesses.
Okay.
Where contractors will go out and knock on doors and come into small businesses, do the energy assessment if the business agrees, make recommendations, line up contractors, make sure the work is done and done well, make sure the business gets the rebate, helps them fill out the rebate application or fills it out for them, helps them find a little financing if they can't put out the additional money that they need to put out to implement the project, make sure the work is done with quality. So it's full service support paid for by the utility to make it really easy for the small business to implement a lighting retrofit or replace old air conditioning equipment or whatever they can do to save energy.
Well, and Howard, too, in the report, it mentions that there's job creation that comes with this.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about what kind of job creation we could see if these energy efficient programs really went full bore across the region?
Thanks for bringing that up. The last part of the analysis that we did was to look at the net impacts on jobs and income if we pursue energy efficiency best practices. And so we did some macroeconomic modeling looking at the direct benefits in terms of jobs that would be supported in selling and installing energy efficiency measures, as well as the indirect jobs that would be supported throughout our economies if households and consumers are reducing their utility bills. They have a little bit more money in their pocket at the end of the month to go out and spend on food, on entertainment, on clothing. Businesses can do a little bit more marketing, do a little bit more investment in product improvement or expand their production, and looked at the job impacts of that indirect spending, and also looked at the impacts on jobs at the utilities and the fuel suppliers, where there'd be some reduction in jobs if we have 21% less electricity use, and netted it all out for each state and across the region. And the analysis showed that if we pursue the high efficiency scenario, get the 21% savings by the year 2020, we would support an additional 28,000 jobs throughout the 6-state region. And that's not a huge number relative to the total labor force, but it's about 0.3% reduction in the unemployment rate in the region in 2020.
Well, and I think that's so critical right now. And I know for Colorado, you guys are estimating that it's close to 7,000 jobs, both direct and indirect, that are affected by this work.
Right. Colorado would see an additional 7,000 jobs by the year 2020, which will help us get out of the recession and put people back to work.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would complain about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all significant. It's what I would like to go into when we come back after break is how do we get this rolling, and where do you find that initial investment money that's going to need to be put in there, and what can the consumer do to help push this along and advocate for these changes at the utility level. And we hear a lot frequently is that our utility regulatory structure is broken, and so what can we do to fix that, and what's the history behind that?
Absolutely. When we come back, like Kelly said, we will be talking about that more with Dr. Howard Geller, the Executive Director of the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project. To learn more about SWEEP, go to swenergy.org. And to get a copy of their new report, the $20 billion Bonanza, go to billionbonanza.com. And to check out Kelly's new adventure, go to rapidtechtransit.com. More when we come back with Dr. Howard Geller. Welcome back to Driving Force Radio. On today's show, it's Energy 101, and my co-host is Kelly De La Torre, the CEO and founder of Rapid Tech Transit, and that's at rapidtechtransit.com. And Kelly, we've been talking with Dr. Howard Geller from the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project up in Boulder, Colorado, and they've recently released this report called the $20 billion Bonanza. And what's so interesting to me is they have found a way for the 6-state region here in the Rockies to really go and get this cost benefit of $20 billion over a 10-year period from 2010 to 2020 by just utilizing energy efficiency programs. And that's from the commercial side at the utility level all the way to the consumer side in your own home. And I think that number is so interesting because it's an enormous number in the whole scheme of everything. But I know we want to go into some of the policy ramifications during this segment and really take a look at that. So where are we going, Kelly?
Yeah, so we've been talking about the methodology behind the report was that they looked at these best practices that are going on across the country and figured out, okay, if these certain programs are implemented, then we can get where we need to be.
Right.
The question right before we went to break was, how do we get there? What changes are needed? How can the consumer get involved? And so I'm going to throw that back over to you, Dr. Geller. Is what do we need to do? How do we start?
So we have some policies now in place that have propelled the utilities to go from spending $20 million a year on these programs back in 2001 to $300 million in 2012. But the policy set is incomplete. We don't have the full set of policies in all of our states. The key policies that we'd like to see adopted in all states include setting energy savings goals or even savings requirements for the investor-owned utilities in our states. Utilities tend to do better when they're told by their regulators that they're expected to help their customers save energy if it's the most cost-effective resource, and do that before building a more expensive new power plant. We also think it's important to get the incentives right for the utilities so that they're not harmed financially when they help their customers save energy. So there are strategies so that utilities are guaranteed their fixed cost recovery independent of how much energy they sell, so that even if they're selling less energy, they're not hurt financially.
So just to interrupt you for 1 second, so that's always really confusing, I think, to the consumers that, yeah, you look at the utility, they make money by the power they sell. So how does that fit with this?
Right. Well, they're spending money to implement these energy efficiency programs. They should be able to get that money back through the utility bills and also earn a profit. We suggest they be given performance-based incentives so that the more they save, actually the more their customers save through their assistance, and the greater the economic benefits of their energy efficiency programs, the bigger their profit on their investment in energy efficiency programs. So they should get cost recovery from all ratepayers, plus a profit, depending on the performance of the programs, instead of building that new billion-dollar power plant. Go spend $500 million on energy efficiency programs, But the utility and its shareholders should be able to recover those costs and earn a profit, just as they do when they build new power plants or build a new transmission line.
And there again, the savings is not only cost to the consumer, but then you're going to have less emissions, you're going to have less water use, you're going to have less of everything, so that the consumer is really benefiting not like fourfold or fivefold. Or
That's right. We looked at all those impacts in the report, not just the net economic benefits, but the avoided pollutant emissions and the water savings, the job creation. All of that was taken into account, and so, we found that it's just really a win-win-win opportunity here for the consumer, the business, the environment.
Yeah, it just shows how it's all interrelated to all of these different factors. It's just a landscape of these moving parts.
Right.
So anyway, back to your policy recommendations.
Right. So I'm most of the way down the list, the key recommendations. And another recommendation is to involve all the utilities. We have programs now that are either okay or good or very good at the large investor-owned utilities, the main utilities. But most of the small utilities, often municipal utilities or rural electric cooperatives, don't have programs today. And it's kind of not fair to their customers that, the consumers of the large utilities have these incentives, have this support. But if you're served by a smaller utility, you don't. So we really want to see all the utilities moving forward with these programs, and there's good examples here in our region and throughout the country of some smaller utilities that are implementing excellent energy efficiency programs. The municipal utility in Fort Collins, Colorado is an example.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about Fort Collins? Because that's one of the examples in the report, and really interesting and great for our region.
Right. So that's a municipally owned utility. The decisions on what the utility does is made by the City Council in Fort Collins. They're the governing body for the utility. And 4 or 5 years ago, they decided to make energy efficiency and renewable energy a top priority. They were getting most of their power from coal-fired power plants, from the wholesale provider of power in northern Colorado, the Platte River Power Authority. They polled their citizens and took the pulse on what their community was interested in seeing the utility do, and there was very strong support for moving more aggressively on energy efficiency and renewable energy. So the governing body, the City Council, adopted some goals for the utility and told the utility to go out and ramp up these programs and spend more money to help their customers save energy. So they have staff that are searching for best practice programs and implementing those programs. And if you look at how much they're saving relative to their sales, what percent of their sales they're saving each year, they're doing the best of all the utilities in Colorado. They're doing better than the large investor-owned utility in the Metro Denver area, Xcel Energy. So they're a good example of a small utility. They serve maybe 50,000 customers in total, but they're showing that it can be done whether you're a big utility or a small utility.
Yeah, and they're being recognized nationally for this, because at the MIT Clean Education and Empowerment Award that was held last week, they gave one of those Clean Tech Awards to Judy Brendel, who is the one that, Judy Dorsey, she's owner of the Brendel Group in Fort Collins, and she is the one that pulled together the Fort Zed project, which is a zero energy district. And so it's really getting a lot of recognition of what we can do.
Well, and Fort Collins, for the last few years, has really been on the forefront of all things clean energy, energy efficiency.
Yeah.
I mean, they are one of those best practice hubs here in the United States. If you want to see best practice energy use at its best, I mean, they have New Belgium, they have their power authority, they have Fort Zed, they have some amazing, amazing work up there in northern Colorado.
And sorry to interrupt. We're hosting the first ever Women in Energy Fort Collins event in November. I think it's November 14th.
And where would people learn about that, Kelly?
They can go to wie-womeninenergy.com, and we'll post the event there.
Okay.
You have to be a woman to go. I'd love to attend.
Oh yes, we've never actually had men interested in coming. So you'd be more. I'll send you the invitation. We'd love to have you.
I'm a single guy. It sounds great.
Well, Dr. Geller, I want to come back to something that I think was implied as we've talked about some of the policy issues that are going on with the energy organizations, and it's really how does the consumer get the information? How do they become involved? What are the steps they need to take to get out there and say, okay, I want to participate, or I want to urge my electric company, my utility, to get engaged in this bigger conversation? Where do they go? What do they do?
So the utilities all have websites that explain all their programs, that list the rebates that are available. So you can start with the website of your utility to see if you have programs and rebates available. And as I said, all the large electric utilities that serve the majority of customers in our region have fairly comprehensive programs these days. And some of the smaller utilities, like the Fort Collins utility, also have programs. So I think that's the best way to investigate what your utility offers. And if you don't have programs or don't have complete programs, contact the utility and let them know you would like to see them. All the utilities do solicit feedback from their customers, and let them know that, and maybe even write a letter to the editor to your newspaper to complain, to urge your utility to get on board with energy efficiency programs and take advantage of the most cost-effective and cleanest resource available.
I have one more quick question, Howard, and it really has to go with some of the work that we're seeing municipalities as well as the the utilities putting in place as well. I know the City and County of Denver has a huge energy initiative going on right now. And I'm assuming that Xcel Energy, as you've spoken about several times, is really engaged in a very much larger perspective. Excuse me. How are organizations working together with the city-based or municipality-based programs as well as the utility programs? Do they go hand in hand, or are they separate pieces?
So the utilities with good programs do look for opportunities to partner. They know that partnership is critical to the success of their programs. So they're working with cities, with counties, large and small, to make sure that those counties and cities are supported, have rebates and other services that they can take advantage of. The utility often promotes both their services and rebates and assistance, as well as any other assistance that's out there. Xcel Energy is planning to help promote some of the financing opportunities that exist for consumers and businesses to get low interest loans that aren't their loans, but they're going to help promote that and make sure that customers are aware of those opportunities and take advantage of those programs that aren't the utilities programs. And so that's an important function for utilities. Utilities that have good programs are also working very closely with the contractor community. The contractors are critical to the success of these programs.
Yeah, definitely.
They're the ones that are often hired to implement efficiency projects in homes, home retrofit projects, or business projects, from changing out lighting to more comprehensive retrofits of businesses. So the utilities train contractors, certify contractors, have lists of high-quality certified contractors for their customers, help promote their programs through contractors. It's often the contractors that are out there selling the utility programs. They're knocking on doors. They're the direct point of contact with households. So that's a very important part of best practice utility programs, is to get those partnerships in place, to have strong partnerships, to take advantage of the contractor community and build them up and work with them very closely.
So can we talk about some of the statistics involved and some of the findings, the specific findings that you found in the report? So the net economic benefits, I know you have them broken out by state, and
right.
So could you just give a little bit of an overview about that?
Sure. The study did look at the impact state by state as well as for the 6-state region, and the $20 billion in net benefits is for the 6-state region, and the net benefits for Arizona would be a little over $7 billion, for Colorado close to $5 billion. Nevada is next at about $3.5 billion. New Mexico and Utah each would save about $1.7 billion, and Wyoming, our smallest state, their benefit would be a little under $1 billion. And all of that totals to the $20 billion for the region as a whole. We also found that if we pursued best practice programs and got the 21% savings by 2020, we would avoid or be able to shut down 32 large power plants in the region.
Oh, that is crazy.
32 large power plants.
So hopefully that means the power plants in Four Corners.
Some of those plants would be old, dirty, coal-fired power plants that are 30, 40, 50 years old, and instead of investing in pollution control equipment to keep them running for another 5, 10, 15 years, we can shut them down. Some of those avoided plants are new power plants, which are typically natural gas-fired power plants. Right. So we'd be reducing investment in new power plants, shutting down old plants, reducing fuel purchases, and reducing the emissions that go along with operating those power plants.
And the water, correct?
And reducing the water consumption. There is water use in power plants and the cooling systems, those cooling towers putting off steam that you see in the winter. If we're operating 32 less power plants, we're using less water in the cooling systems, and that's where we get the bulk of the water savings.
And so we've talked about, so how about the emissions? The report says that CO2 emissions reductions in 2020 equivalent to 1 million cars taken off the road.
Actually, I think that's just for one of the states. The total CO2 emissions reduction for the region in the year 2020 is equivalent to about 6 million vehicles off the road.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So we're talking about a reduction of about 15 or 16% in the carbon dioxide emissions by the year 2020 from pursuing the high efficiency scenario for our region and getting the 21% savings. Carbon dioxide, of course, is the main pollutant contributing to the greenhouse effect and the global warming that we're seeing occur now.
It makes me think, so if you're taking these power plants offline, you're increasing the available capacity on our existing grid. And so does that, do you think that will help initiate a movement towards electric vehicles? Like, does it free up some capacity for that? Or how does it have an interplay with sort of these emerging transportation issues and all of that? Have you looked at that, or a sweep looked at that?
We have looked at electric vehicles and what the benefits would be and what the transition strategy would be for bringing electric vehicles into the grid, and in conjunction with reducing energy waste and encouraging energy efficiency, we think electric vehicles are a good way to go for the utility system, for the environment. We'd like to see policies in place so that most of the charging is done at night when there's this excess capacity in the utility system. We're not increasing peak demand and having to build new power plants to support those electric vehicles. And that's very feasible through control devices, through time of use rates, so that you pay maybe 5 cents a kilowatt hour at night and 50 cents a kilowatt hour on peak. That would be a big incentive to avoid charging on peak. So the two strategies of increasing energy efficiency in general and shifting to electric vehicles, getting our cars and trucks and buses off of petroleum fuels and onto electricity is a great strategy in our view. And we believe also in the next couple of decades we can be moving away from fossil fuels and getting a higher fraction of our electricity from clean renewable sources.
Right.
And reduce pollutant emissions that way as well. And the combination of energy efficiency and a shift to renewable energy is the way to go over the long run.
And I know in China they can incorporate healthcare costs in their energy planning. So is there any movement towards that in the U.S. and that a movement towards energy efficiency? How do you incorporate those reduced healthcare costs in those policy discussions?
Right. So in fact, some utilities and their regulators do give a little extra credit to energy efficiency measures and programs in the cost-benefit analysis, not just the direct economic benefits, but a multiplier to take into account these environmental and public health benefits. And in fact, we do that here in Colorado. One of the more enlightened policies of our regulatory commission is to tell the utility to add a 10% bonus to the benefit side for the energy efficiency programs when they do the cost-benefit analysis. And for their programs serving low-income households where there's additional social benefits, the utility takes a 25% extra credit.
Wow.
Dr. Geller, I have to ask, just because I've heard you talk about so many things here in the last few minutes, but the potential of shutting down 32 power plants in the region, and all of the ramifications that brings. What do you foresee as the pushback from industry on that? I mean, obviously there's 32 plants that could potentially lose the jobs that are at them. 32 plants which probably are the economic driver for whatever city and or area they sit in. What pushback are you seeing in this conversation around that?
Right. Well, first of all, the industries that exist today are increasingly realizing that energy efficiency is the best investment for their utility. They support these programs, they participate in the programs, realizing that it helps utilities avoid billions of dollars of investment they would otherwise make, which, of course, those industries would eventually be paying for, as would every household. The utilities don't build billion-dollar power plants out of the goodness of their hearts.
Right.
They recover those costs with a profit from their ratepayers over time. So the consuming industries throughout the region are getting it, increasingly getting it, that this is the best way to go, that energy efficiency should be the top priority for their utilities. Some of the power plants we're avoiding are new power plants that don't exist yet. We believe that about 2/3 would be new plants and 1/3 would be old, dirty plants, like the uncontrolled plants in the Four Corners areas at the San Juan generating station. Those plants should be shut down, and strong energy efficiency programs will facilitate being able to shut down those plants. It's going to be a lot easier to shut them down if we can eliminate load growth. Basically what we're doing in our high efficiency scenario is eliminating growth in electricity demand. Even though our population's growing, our economy's growing, we're keeping electricity use flat out through the year 2020, facilitating shutting down the old plants, avoiding natural gas-fired new power plants, and bringing in more renewable power, solar power and wind power at the same time.
Well, Dr. Geller, it has been fascinating to talk to you. We're almost out of time. Where can listeners learn more about the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project, and how can they learn more about you guys?
So our website is www.swenergy.org, SW for Southwest. And there's a separate site with the report, the executive summary, fact sheets for each state and the region. And that site is 20, the number 20, Billion Bonanza, altogether, 20billionbonanza.com.
Okay, well, thank you so much for being with us. Kelly, thank you so much for enlightening us today with Dr. Geller and making this connection with SWEEP for the Driving Force Radio.
Yeah, of course, it's just another great discussion that just shows how we can reduce our energy use and actually live better. We can all do well by doing good, like Jiggershaw says.
Absolutely. And tell us again, where is the Women in Energy program in Fort Collins, and how can people learn more?
The next Women in Energy will be in Fort Collins at the Rocky Mountain Inosphere. The website's wie-womeninenergy.com, and my new website is rapidtechtransit.com.
When is the Energy Forum in Fort Collins?
November 14th.
So November 14th, check it out at womenenergy.com. And to learn more about Dr. Geller's work, go to swenergy.org or go download the report starting this week at 20billionbonanza.com. That's 20billionbonanza.com. Or follow them on Twitter at SouthwestEE. And thank you so much for joining us. This is Jan Mazotti, Kelly De La Torre, and Dr. Howard Geller, wishing you a happy weekend. Thank you.